audio, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
You and your folks there.
Getting us live
And
right now.
Miss Walsh, you and that looks like Billy and Dale. Can you hear me? Hello? Amy, you're controlling the audio, is that right? You and your folks there. Billy, can you speak so we can hear you? Miss Walsh, you and that looks like Billy and Dale. Can you hear me?
Hello?
All right, we heard you. All right. And Joey? Billy, can you speak so we can hear you?
Hello? Hello?
All right, we heard you. All right. Okay. All right.
Got Joey Avery there too.
Yep. Did I miss anybody? All right. Is Walter Hughes on?
Yes, I'm here.
All right, great, Walter. Good. We'll get to you just shortly.
All right.
All right. Mr. Kamey, if you can mute everybody's background. I'm hearing background noise. Is anybody else here? Walter Hughes on.
Disconnect this phone.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, wait, 1, 2, go down.
Great, Walter. We'll get to you just shortly. All right. Mr. Kamey, if you can mute everybody's background. I'm hearing background noise. Is anybody else here? I'm still hearing background noise. Is anybody else hearing it?
Just a moment.
Okay.
It is Joey Avery's that is giving us the problem.
Okay. I think that fixed it. Okay. We ready to begin? All right. The time, and I would like to confirm that the public is streaming live video. Is that correct, Mr. Kamey? I'm assuming it is. All right, the time is 5:33. We're a little late getting started. I apologize for that. At this time, I would like to call the Lawrence County Council, the first meeting for the month of April 2020 to order. This is a virtual meeting, and certainly we are encourage the public to participate along with us. At this time, I would like to ask Mr. Wood if he would return thanks through the invocation, please. So, Mr. Wood, if you would do so at this time.
Joe is muted, he can't hear. Hey,
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let us pray. Dear Lord, as we come here today, get together today, I ask that we have your guidance as we try to carry on the business of Lawrence County. In a time like no other, we need someone to show us the way. Lord, there's so much sickness in the world today, and only you can lead us and show us what needs to be done. I ask your blessings on the ones that are caring for the sick as well as for the sick. I ask that you give us guidance, give the leaders guidance and the chemist guys that need so much to have someone to show them the way for a vaccine to cure this disease. Be with our own public safety as they put themselves on the front line of this. Lord, our Lawrence County is well blessed to have department heads that carry on the business of our county when we need in such a situation as we got now. With this virus going around, I also ask that you help those that lost so much during the storms this past week. And I ask that you be with our president as some critical decisions have to be made. I ask these things in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I did ask Dale if he would move the American flag, and you can see it there. So Dale, because it is a public meeting, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance at this time?
Yes, sir. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge
Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic
for which
for
it
which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next is the approval of the agenda dated April the 14th, 2020. I would like to add 2 items for your consideration. First is, while it is listed under reports to council, under letter A, capital project sales tax update from the Capital Sales Tax Committee, if you would just add the name Walter Hughes. He is online and he will be giving a brief overview of that committee's process. And then under reports to council, under letter E, would you please add Joey Avery, emergency management, coronavirus COVID-19 update. Are there any other additions to the agenda? Hearing none.
How about a
Is there-
deletion?
I'm sorry.
How about a deletion?
Go ahead. Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't ask that.
The public hearing, the ordinance 874 international codes was published in the papers that it was happening tonight at the courthouse. Should we postpone that out of transparency, or is this an immediate need that we need to process this evening?
I'll defer that to Mr. Kamen, Mr. Satterfield, and Chuck Bobo. I can't answer that. Mr. Kamen, what's your opinion?
We really need to get the county attorney to fill out that one.
Joey, not Joey. Sandy had somebody over there at the courthouse in case somebody showed up. And I don't think anybody showed up.
Mr. Chairman, we have that covered. We have somebody at the courthouse. Somebody has so far showed up. I'm receiving text messages as to whether anybody shows up, they will be directed to come over here, which I think in the progress, go forward with public hearing.
Okay, what I think I heard, and by the way, the audio in that smaller conference room is not good, folks. We're having a hard time hearing you all, but what I think I heard was there is someone at the courthouse, and if someone shows up, they're gonna text us. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Patterson, are you okay with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, does anybody else have any concerns or additions or deletions?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve the amended agenda?
Motion to approve it.
Motion by Mr. Wood, is there a second?
Second, Diane Anderson.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Because it is a virtual meeting, each vote requires a roll call vote, so I will go in alphabetical order each time. Councilwoman Anderson,
Yay, yes.
Councilman Carroll,
Yes.
Councilman McDaniel,
Yes.
Councilman Patterson, Brown,
Yes.
okay, Councilman Wood,
Yes.
Councilman Yance.
Yes.
And I'm yes, that's a 7-0 amended agenda. Next is the approval of the minutes. For the sake of time, if you would allow us to approve all minutes as one vote, I certainly would, that would encourage this since we have to do individual roll calls. So is there a motion to approve the minutes from March 10th, 2020, the council committee as a whole, March 10th, 2020, the regular session of council, March 18th, 2020, a called meeting regarding the COVID-19, and a called meeting on March the 24th for emergency resolutions. Is there a motion to approve all 4 as submitted?
I have some amendments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let me, can we get a motion in a second, and then we can make the amendments, or you want to go ahead and do the amendments now?
Motion to approve all 4 meetings.
Okay, and I'll come back to you, Brown, in just a minute. All right, there's a motion by Mr. Wood. Is there a second?
Second, Kemp Yance.
Second by Mr. Yance. Now, Mr. Patterson, I recognize you for the changes.
The March 10th, Lawrence County Council meeting at 5:30.
So the regular
It has-
meeting,
That would be, I think that's the second one in the pack.
Yep.
It has council members, Ms. Anderson and Mr. McDaniel absent. They were all present. Everyone was present for that meeting.
okay, I don't remember that, but, okay,
I went back and looked at the video. They were there.
all right.
And they made motions in the minutes, so they had to be there.
Okay, all right, so change that, please. Any others?
Then the third packet, the called meeting, COVID-19 at 6 p.m. It states that it was virtual. We were met in person. And saying there, it shows Mr. McDaniel absent and he was present at that meeting.
Okay. I can't find it, but I trust you. Go ahead. Are there any others?
That's all I have.
Okay. Okay. All right. Did everybody make those changes? I think they're minor changes, but we do need to get it corrected. So let's see, we had a motion by Mr. Wood and a second by Mr. Yance. Is that correct? To approve all 4 with those changes as submitted by Mr. Patterson. Again, we'll go by roll call. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Yance,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That's a 7-0 vote. Next is, we'll move into reports to council. And at this time, I would like to recognize the chairman of the Lawrence County Capital Project Sales Tax Committee, Mr. Walter Hughes, to give us an update. And Tammy, I'm not sure if Walter is on the screen, if we could see him. I don't see him. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Hey,
I'm
Walter.
here somewhere.
Okay. Walter, if you could give us an update on where your committee is.
Absolutely. Good evening, everybody. So where we stand right now is we've approved one project fully presented in the books, and it's the Lawrence County Airport. They're asking for $500,000 out of the total of $1.5 million to renovate the terminal and some hangars and help them kind of bring in more revenue. What we have scheduled coming up for the next meeting is the Lawrence County Parks and Recreation. They're doing parks around the entire county, and looking forward to hearing about that. And then following that, we have the animal shelter coming up this week to extend the amount of, not kennels, runs that they have, along with some soundproofing and things. And last but not least, we have Lawrence County Courthouse. We're going to be hearing about that on Thursday with the 2 different budgets. And let's see here, 2 that we received this week that we'll be reviewing and getting on the docket for presentations are the Town of Gray Court submitted for Parks and Recreation within their city, and the Lawrence County Trails Association, in combination with Prisma Health, have put in an application to help pave some of the trail. And just did some napkin math, and basically with the budget of $35 million, if we were to accept every single project without modification right now, we'd be at about $15.8 million. So we still have an additional about $19.2 million available for other projects. So we're not running into the red anytime soon or anything like that. And everything's moving swiftly. We're adapting like y'all are with Zoom meetings and trying to overcome those technological hindrances. But everything's going smoothly so far. And our next meeting's on Thursday because we were in step with y'all's meetings and figured if something needed approval, it'd be wise to take 2 days back. So anything that needed to be streamlined, we could work that way.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hughes. Are there any questions from council members of Mr. Hughes or his committee?
Hey, Mr. Hughes. Go ahead, Ms. Anderson.
Meeting Thursday.
I'm sorry, one more time.
The time of the meeting Thursday and where?
Oh, yes, sir. It's at 5:30 and we have a Zoom link that we're sending out first thing in the morning. So it'll be the same platform as this. And it probably won't go as smoothly as this, so bear with us.
Diane Anderson, have y'all set a ending date for the projects yet?
Yes, ma'am. We're working with the 28th of this month, but
Okay.
due to the COVID and the pandemic, we might have some leeway to move that back a week or two. But that's part of our discussion on this Thursday, is to see if we can move that back a little bit, because I know Mr. Crookshanks needs time to get this all to the election committee. So we're going to try to work and get that moved back about a week or two. So the deadline right now is 4/28, but we're hoping to move that back by a week. So kind of give everybody a little breathing room.
All right, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. McDaniel, you have a question?
Oh, he answered it. Thank you.
Okay.
Good deal.
Just to clarify, it will be a virtual meeting for this Thursday at 5:30. Is that right, Walter?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from anyone regarding the capital sales tax from Mr. Hughes? We're getting ready to move into some requests under reports to council, but before we leave, Mr. Hughes, does anyone else have any comments or questions?
Wait, are you going to advertise the meeting for Thursday for the public?
Oh, yes, sir. Bobby Smith, I think he spoke with y'all last time. He'll be putting out the links to the local media, and I'll make sure that y'all all get an invite as well. That's what I was jotting down in my notes, is to make sure y'all all get an invitation.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. Under reports to council, under letter A, number 1, the capital project sales tax, the parks submittal. And this time I would like to recognize our Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. Andy Howard. Andy, are you on? Andy is in the conference room. Andy, you're gonna have to speak very loudly because we're having a hard time hearing you from that conference room.
I don't have any problem speaking loudly.
All right, the floor is yours.
I'm here to answer any questions. We did decide to go to every park in the county, from West Shoals at Fish Park, Drake Park, the Lawrence. That every park was touched by these funds if possible. And it's simple improvements that can be done, things that won't cost more maintenance than what was there before. Basically things that will improve the county as a whole.
Does that conclude that, Andy?
That's all I got for you. You got questions?
Are there questions from council members?
Yeah, I had one about the parks. One in particular, Martha Dendy. I know they have a committee together. They have been doing some planning in that area. Meet with them at all?
I did not. I met with the city of planning, but not with the city of plans for in that project.
Okay, you said it one more time, Andy. Sorry.
I did not meet with that committee. I did meet with but I have not met with a committee.
Okay, thank you.
Andy, Diane Anderson. I was listening to Mr. Hughes, and he was referring to how much money he has probably have left over maybe. And this one project that's been on my mind for a while, and it's regarding something like a water park for the county. We don't have any pools or anything that's available for our young people. And I would like to see if we can maybe add something to that list if you have a little bit of time to do that for me.
I can do that.
I'll help you. I'll help you.
I can do that, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. I'll help you if you need me.
All right.
Are there any other questions of Mr. Howard?
I got one.
Yes,
Has anything been said about the new EMS emergency service building that council's been talking about for about 8 years?
That would be a question for Mr. Kamey.
No, that is not a request before the Capital Sales Tax Committee.
However, let's go ahead and address that. Dale and others are working with Mr. Kamey to finish out that building. No, we're not on the capital sales tax, but Dale, can you kind of give us an update right quick where we are?
Dale, if you would,
John's asked us.
loud.
Okay, a little confusion. We're talking about the nest up there in Gray Court, right? Northern Emergency.
No. He's asking about the feasibility study we just got back.
Yes, sir. We have talked with those that company that has done that initial study for us. They are working on some options to do a phased approach to construct those facilities, and we're evaluating how we would prioritize that. Of course, EMS headquarters would be a high priority, and the evidence storage is another high priority. But we're going to come to you with a way to phase those construction projects in.
But just to clarify what Mr. Kamey said, there is not an application to the Capital Sales Tax Committee for construction because there, quite frankly, wouldn't be enough money to build it. Is that correct, Mr. Kamey?
That's correct. Currently, council hasn't had a chance really to decide which direction you want to go in terms of moving forward with the evidence, probably with the LAC and the EMS headquarters, of course, has been a top priority of council for some time. But we are getting that ready to bring that back to council. Don't anticipate that will be part of this capital sales tax. If this capital sales tax comes in significantly less than $35 million, in my opinion, that just means that the capital sales tax will be paid off quicker. And then we will have the opportunity sooner than later to revisit that capital sales tax in a couple of years. So there is a possibility in a couple of years that a new capital sales tax would be able to fund future projects such as the 911 center and maybe an LEC sometime down the road.
Mr. Yance, does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think Andy's already been seated. The next is under letter A, number 2, animal control submittal. This time I'll recognize Jeff Brown. I think I see Jeff. Jeff, please speak loudly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So what we're looking at is our animal shelter, as I've told you before, right now we have chain link runs, no solid dividers between the dogs on the largest part of our shelter. We don't need more runs to put more dogs because quite frankly, we'd have to have more staff and it's just going to fill up no matter how big you make it. What we do need is solid dividers, some updated kennels, some noise abatement, as you've seen in the shelter evaluation that we submitted several months ago, and we need new flooring in there. So what we've submitted for the capital sales tax project is to remodel our existing facility to the tune of $280,000 plus. But we believe that would be the best use of the money at this time.
Okay. Are there questions of Mr. Brown of his submittal to the Capital Sales Tax Committee? And let me just remind, I should have said this in the beginning. None of these projects have been approved by the 6-member committee at this time. Is that, I think I'm correct in that, Mr. Hughes, right?
I thought you said that you had approved the Lawrence County Airport.
Yes, ma'am. We've approved the airport.
Okay.
These 3 that are being talked about tonight will be put before everybody on Thursday.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for Ms. Anderson correcting me on that. Other than the airport. Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Brown? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Next is the historic courthouse submittal. There are 2 projects, and this time I'll recognize Mr. Satterfield.
Council, while they are 2 projects, what I'm attempting to do is provide some alternatives to the sales tax committee dependent on the other projects that they have and the amount of the funds available. It sounds like we're doing well so far. First project would be the exterior of the building. That project is estimated to be about $2.9 million. That would bring the exterior of the courthouse back to its original grandeur. Replacing all the rotted dental work, moldings, repairing all the stucco that is falling off the porticos, and fixing all of that. It will bring it back to like new. So that would be the first option. Now, that's the first option because we have to do the outside before we do anything to the inside. If they should choose to do both exterior and interior, that's estimated to be about $8.7 million to bring the entire courthouse back to its grandeur. Now, the interior would include all new stairwells that are code compliant. The current stairwells do not meet code. It would provide for an interior elevator to make the upper second floor accessible to the public. It would renovate all of the offices, all new bathrooms, all new wire, everything inside would be new, all new HVAC wiring and electrical. So that would be the total project of exterior and interior. I'll answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions?
Since you're talking about the interior, have you decided what office is gonna be in the courthouse?
Ma'am, that is the council. What offices would be in there and how those spaces would be utilized.
I couldn't hear you, I'm sorry.
He said that would be the county council's decisions as to what would be housed in there.
That is correct. As well as how you would use the council chambers. You may want to use the council chambers as council meetings and arrange it so that you can have of that. The original plan is to remove that ceiling and go back to the original octagonal shaped ceiling that was in the building original. That would be very nice to see that. It would look really great. But yes, you do have a decision coming sometime in the next year or so as to how you utilize those spaces, utilize that building.
Are there other questions?
Yeah, one, if for the inside of the courtroom area specifically where we're in the council chambers, if we don't know what we're going to do with it, how are we going to get a good estimate on next steps?
Let me just interject here if I can. I think that the desire right now is to move forward to phase 2. If you recall, we've got a 3-phase approach to the historic courthouse. The first phase has already been funded by county council, and y'all will be talking about that shortly in tonight's agenda. The second phase is the phase to deal with the exterior of the courthouse, which is the one that will go before the capital sales tax committee. The third phase, even though it's being presented, is probably one that is premature at this point. We don't know what we're going to do with the inside of the building. We don't know what the future use of that facility. We don't know what offices belong in there, et cetera. So really that third phase is something that we'll be dealing with sometime down the road, maybe as a re-up of the next capital sales tax, maybe more appropriate for that third and final phase.
Okay. Also, one more thing while I got you. If you're not speaking, could you put your computer on mute so we can hear from the office? Hillcrest.
Are you referring to this office here?
No. Right. No, there's an interference in some of the backgrounds when people are talking on the smart board. It's coming through on my end anyway.
Okay.
Okay. Are there other questions of the courthouse? Okay. I'm having technical difficulties. Mr. Wood, I'm gonna ask you to take over right now. I'm gonna probably lose my battery. I'm trying to log in on a different iPad, so if you could, I think the airport is up next. Andy, we've already heard from that, and Andy can come back for the Trails Association. I'm gonna be trying to log in on another iPad, folks.
For the Trails Association, from what I understand, is they are submitting an application for paving a portion of the trail that we're currently working on. We're currently in the process of the planning phase. So that is really all that entails, paving. Does anybody have any questions on that or the trails?
Are there questions? Okay, thank you, Andy. At this time, all right. Tammy, am I in?
David, you're on twice.
All right, good. I'm trying to click me off the original one. Sorry about that. All right. Now I'm back on.
You're good.
Okay. I'm trying to hold this in my lap too, so just bear with me. Okay.
You're doing a good job.
Oh, I'm not. I'm trying to hold this and I can't find my agenda. What's next? I had to move.
Financial report, Lisa Kirk.
Lisa, okay, you're unmuted. You're good, Lisa. Lisa's live when you're ready, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Ms. Kirk, if you can give us an update on the financial report.
You should have a financial report located within your packet. Does anyone have any questions?
The only one I got is just like I asked you every time you come with a financial report, how do we look?
At the moment, Mr. Woods, we're looking very well. Most of our revenues are coming in better than expected and better than last year. So we're in pretty good shape right now.
Well, thank you very much.
Ms. Kirk, are we anticipating a surplus this year?
At this time, Mr. Patterson, I would say yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Do we know approximately how much?
No, sir, not at this time. We haven't received our quarterly, really 6 months of revenue from the state. We'd have the first quarter of this year and the second quarter of this year that we haven't received our largest funds from the state yet. So I'd hate to guess at that.
Okay. I had a couple other questions on the local option sales tax. Do you expect us to realize 100% of that? It looks like we're only at 56% 8 months in.
We have not received all of our allocation from the state yet, but I do expect that to probably be lower with the COVID-19.
Okay, and 330 intergovernmental revenues, it looked like across the board, we're showing about 50%. Are we gonna realize all of those revenues?
Yes, sir. Those revenues are mostly made up of the state funds, like the local tax money, almost all of our state money we haven't received at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, any update on the State Board of Economic Advisors met this week or last week, I think.
I can't hear you, Dr. Pitts.
The State Board of Economic Advisors met. Have you heard anything from your counterparts in other counties? Any anticipation of any more further cuts because of this coronavirus?
No, sir, there hasn't been any discussion among my peers concerning that yet.
Okay, all right. Any other questions of Ms. Kirk? I would like to say publicly, and I know that others would like to join in with me in thanking you for you and your staff for doing the finance as well as some benefits and some human resources. I know other people have picked up, but I know that your office has especially picked up, and we've got communication from that. So I'd like to publicly thank you and your staff and others for picking up during this interim time.
Thank you, Dr. Pitts. My staff has stepped up. They've gone well over and above, and I'm very proud of them, and I'm proud of the team we have. And thank you again.
And while we're on that, I'd like to just share with other council members and the public, and I'm sure that Mr. Kamey will mention this a little bit later on regarding the continuity of operations. Because of that drive-through in the treasurer's office, has really been swamped because all of the business is being handled through that drive-through window. I think the auditor's office has some staff in there. I think papers going to the clerk of court are transferred through there, according to Cindy Burke. So I'd like to thank Cindy and those folks in that office for really being displaced and helping the entire operations of the county continue. Mr. Kamey, you want to mention anything about that? Mr. Kamey, you're muted.
Okay, now I'm not. I'm sorry. About what?
Just the continuity of operations and how the treasurer's office through the drive-through has really kept the business of the county rolling.
Oh yes, absolutely. If you've been up here, people line up before 9 o'clock, and people are still here many times after 5 o'clock. The only way to interact with all of the folks in Hillcrest, the assessor's office, the probate, the auditor's office, of course, the treasurer, the register of deeds, and the codes office, the only way to transact business is through that drive-through. So we do appreciate all the work that the treasurer and her staff have done on making sure that we continue to be able to provide those services to the public.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa, and we'll come back to you shortly as it relates to the auditor recommendation. Okay. Next.
We're about to get into the 654 report. So if you want to have Lisa mention anything about that, that's the next.
Okay, go ahead. That's next, isn't it?
Yes.
I have prepared the 654 report based on the resolution that was done. At the beginning of fiscal year 19, we had approximately $1.4 million in surplus and pertaining to the 6 mills. Fiscal year 19, we generated $1.3 million from the 6 mills. So therefore, at this time, we should carry forward $2.7 million of the 6 mills, which is set aside as the deficit reduction that was done years ago, and then it was set up as a reserve.
Okay.
It is a part of the general fund balance.
This is required by ordinance to provide a quarterly report on this 6 mills. This 6 mills was enacted, I don't know what year. It was before I was on council. Mr. Wood and Ms. Anderson, you all may help me here.
I think it was 2008, maybe.
Okay, 2008. It was to reduce the deficit at the time. As you can see, we're carrying forward almost $2.8 million estimated carry forward. Just as a sort of indication of of where we are as we begin the budget a little bit later tonight in title only. I think we need to be cognizant that a lot of folks have been laid off. Times are hard for a lot of folks. So as we get into our estimated revenues, I'm kind of giving you my idea here that we hold tight to our existing budget without a tax increase, but that is just my opinion, especially given the revenue that we're going to carry forward. I'm sorry, I digressed. I didn't mean to digress that much. However, are there any questions about the 654 fund of Lisa? Hearing none, we'll move forward. Next is the first draft for this budget, and I'll recognize Mr. Kamey.
Share, we're gonna do share. Y'all hold with me for a second. Down here. Click on right here. Click on share. Getting technical support here real quick. Make sure you're unmuted. Y'all can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm gonna try not to lose you and run through this. I think everybody can see this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. As you remember, we went through a major financial restructure when I first got here. We had a 3-year financial restructure. I'm just going to fly through these slides here. Year 1 in FY18, we introduced these concepts here. FY19, the second year, we introduced more efficiencies. We started stripping out the capital from the operation and maintenance, and that was really key, because it was very difficult to plan ahead when we had all our capital mixed in with our operation and maintenance. In the second year, we were actually able to start doing some long-range financial planning because we started having some plans in place, in particular our capital plan. The last year was last year where we were now able to have a good idea of what our fund balance was and really start to look at that long-term financial planning. And as you recall, we ran many years of deficits, significant deficits. FY17 was our first year. We started running some surpluses. And if you recall, we had all our funds mixed into one bucket and pouring money into those buckets. We didn't know where we were losing money. What we did is we divided up the number of buckets. This is all history. This will be the last time I present this to you, so you won't see this again next year. But I think it helps to understand where we were. And we had, we took those buckets, figured out which ones were leaking and which ones were healthy, and then we're able to address those. The general fund was a leaky bucket. Now we just saw some numbers. That general fund and the fund balance is very healthy. Deficits continue to be non-existent. FY19 data is not incorporated in there, but we're doing well in the general fund, which is really critical right now as we go into this financial uncertainty that we're going to be dealing with in the latter half of FY20, and definitely we'll be seeing the results in FY21. The Victims Assistance Fund, if you recall, was another leaky bucket. We've separated that out from the general fund. It's now its own individual fund, and it now is a balanced fund, so we don't have to worry about that one draining the general fund and having to raise taxes. Solid Waste Fund is something we dealt with last year, and I'm proud to say that it looks very healthy again this year. I'll have a little bit more on that. The other fund we spent a lot of time on last year was the EMS fund. We separated that out as a separate fund from the general fund, has a dedicated millage, as you all know. And then last year we set the capital up for the 128 fund. Just a little bit on some of the efficiencies that are out there. We've been able to save a lot of money. Our employees have done a fabulous job. Employee health insurance, we were really running into some serious problems with employee health insurance continuing to rise. That's now stabilized, and that's been a very big help on the bottom line for the county. Workman's comp, as you all know, our employees have done an excellent job helping us with our workman's comp. However, it's been very evident that this year, and I let you all know that 10-member subcommittee that we put together, or that subcommittee we put together that looked at the first round of HR applications, indicated that we need a risk manager. During this COVID situation and a lot of the situations that we've run into with potential exposures and whatnot, it's become even more apparent we need to have a risk manager, and that'll be something you'll see in your budget. As I recall, in the past, it was very hard to figure out what was going on. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we were mixing up our operation and maintenance. Here you can see the numbers. They just made absolutely no sense. Now, when you strip out the capital, you can see it's much more easier to project forward than where we were. Again, I'm going to hopefully not spend too much time on this part here. Introduce some long-range plans. A lot of this stuff has been completed. This was our restructuring of our pay system. That's already been addressed a couple of years ago, so things are going good there. We've worked on all of those phases. Everything is good there. Again, these are the last times you'll see these slides from the prior years. But this is our first year moving away from the 3-year restructure. So I just want to make sure that, just bring you up to a little bit of history there. You can see our fund balance was restated. Again, our numbers were very difficult to understand in the past. General fund balance, when I first looked at our numbers, it looked as though we were going to run out of money really quick. This is what our actual fund balance was in our general fund. It was declining quite rapidly as it was stated in the audits. Now that's been reversed and we're stable and we're actually healthy. We're above our 25%. And again, that's a good thing because we've got a lot of capital to invest in. Plus right now with the COVID, we really don't have anything to worry about in terms of cuts in services. Now we do want to, of course, as the chairman mentioned, remain conservative in our spending going forward, but we don't have to worry like a lot of, especially the cities that rely a lot on tourism and hospitality taxes. They're looking at some severe cuts in services and, you know, profound layoffs and employees and whatnot. We won't have to worry about any of that because we have that general fund cushion. And that's what that cushion is for times like this that we're coming up to. So now we have a good idea of what our fund balances are, and we can plan forward beyond FY20. So you'll see in this year's budget, we will have a lot of financial planning with our fund balances. You can see there, by the way, that's the dome that needs to be replaced. We'll be talking about that shortly too. Our biggest problem, of course, is debt, is capital rather, and we've addressed a lot of that. As you know, we've got some existing debt. There's the jail debt, which will go off in FY25. These are all paid for through millages that are set aside for those particular bonds. In 2013, we did the admin building, and that one, I believe, is scheduled to be paid off in 24. And then this past year, we let $700,000, which we're about to talk about in a little bit, with the historic courthouse, and then the $3.3 million to take care of the Hillcrest, both the roof and the HVAC situation here at Hillcrest. The 210 fund, if you recall, last year, we decided we would self-fund that rather than borrow money from the outside world. We would borrow that money from the general fund. The 210 is the solid waste fund, the transfer station, and the equipment that is needed. And we'll show you some models in a minute as to how that's going to be paid back over time. But since we have such a healthy fund balance, last year we decided that we would self-fund this. This was an action of council, so we are self-funding that. So we'll be able to pay the taxpayers back rather than have to pay a bank when we go to do those projects. We have the fire special purpose tax district bond that was led in 2015, primarily dealing with the need for the substations due to the ISO reclassification of no longer being 5 miles as the crow flies, but 5 miles how you can drive. Y'all went through all that before my time, and that's about $275,000 per year. That is not a component of our general fund bond capacity, by the way. It's about 4 mills. it should be paid off in FY '25. There's still a few more projects that need to be finished this, hopefully this calendar year. We'll be able to finish those projects. Council just took action to allocate the last amount of money to finish some of that work we committed on the fire stations. And then if you recall, we had the lease, the 10-year lease purchase that was let in 2010. We re-upped that last year. That's covered. The lease payments are covered through the millage that we have in the special purpose tax district. That's Fund 134 and Fund 123 that are paying those back. But we started that last year with buying those $3.5 million worth of equipment. And that is back underway for the next decade. That will be paid for. This is just one of the models, and this shows the surplus from the 123 fund. And a lot of this is unknown. A lot of this has changed, will change in the future, but it just shows you that we have plenty of money. Anything in the green is plenty of money. If we start running into the red, that doesn't mean we're going broke in that fund or that we need to raise taxes. It just means that we want to keep an eye out here on that trend as we move forward. But now we're able to actually look ahead and make sure that the decisions we make today are going to be something that we can continue to fund in the future. The Fire 123 fund is the special purpose tax district millage. We're going to have first reading on that ordinance tonight. It has a very healthy fund balance. It's really two components. It's the 123 fund and then the 134. The 134, they're really both together, approximately 20 mils, but they're set up as two different funds. One is a capital fund. And again, you can see here that this fund is very healthy also. So Fire Special Purpose Tax District continues to remain healthy. Last year, we addressed the problem with EMS, Fund 128. And that was one of the problems that was sorely lacking in finances. It was a definite leaky bucket. And we ran significant deficits through the years. I'm proud to say that a lot of things in 128, we'll probably come back to that in a minute. That situation has changed completely. There's no need at this point to raise taxes for EMS, neither. So I'm kind of skipping to the punch, but there's no fee increase and no tax increase in the budget that I presented to council. The capital fund, see if I'm gonna, yeah, here's the budget structure. Now y'all have a big book, a big binder, and in that binder, you have basically these different appendices, okay? And I'm gonna go through each one of these appendices. This is important that you kind of understand the structure of that book that I gave you. The first part is the general fund overview. It's just a few pages, just gives you your revenues and your expenses. This is a good reference point when we take a look at where we're going, and especially if council wants to continue with the idea of no tax increase or no fee increases. We want to be very careful that we make sure that our revenues and our expenses remain balanced. So that's Appendix A. Now in Appendix B, this is something I introduced last year to try to help the budget process along. There's a lot of numbers in there. By all means, we can dive into those numbers, but all of those budgets do not have significant increases in spending from the current fiscal year. So all of those departments held the line on spending for all of those line items in the Appendix B section. There's no new requests for spending, so there's no new items in there that they've asked for. So there's nothing new over what we're doing in the current fiscal year. There's no increase in fees or taxes for all those budgets that as they stand in the consent budget. There's no additional personnel or increases in existing compensation in that consent section of the budget. And each one of those consent budgets, I've worked directly with those departments and said, okay, here's the numbers I need in order to balance this budget. Are you okay with the numbers that are in the consent budget? And each and every one of those line items in the consent budget section, which is Appendix B, they've all agreed to. So the intent there with Appendix B is that council will be able to take a swift action on all of those, and basically 80% of the budget will be taken care of in a simple fashion through that consent budget. By all means, again, if you take a look at those and you have particular questions in those individual budgets within the consent budget, we can dive into those further. But this just really will help us a lot if we can focus our energy on the rest of the budget. There is a COLA, cost of living increases, to keep our wages in line with inflation. There is the mandatory employee retiree contributions. As you may recall, we have a 1% increase. It was actually 2% in the first year, and we still have 2 or 3 more years of those increases. We're going from 16% to 22% in our requirement for the employee's contribution. But again, that's already built into the consent budget. The numbers all work out. Workman's comp and health insurance are in there. Those numbers are still being refined by both the association and by the state in terms of the health insurance and workman's comp. But those are also in the consent budget. I just want to point out those are estimates only. So hopefully with Appendix B, council can take a look at those and we can take action on those first. And then we will be able to knock out a large volume of the budget, not really the important part of the budget. You're going to have to focus your energy on the rest of the budget, which is the harder budget to look at in terms of folks, department's needs, some of the wants and whatnot. So take a good look at Appendix B. When we hold our first budget meeting, I'm hoping the county council will approve Appendix B, and then we can knock out a good chunk of our work with that.
John,
Appendix C is the non-consent budgets. Now, those are the ones we will have to take a good hard look at. Those are individual departments. I want to point out there's no personnel requests in there. That's a separate appendices. But there are individual line items in those in that Appendix C from different lines in different departments. Now, you might see some departments that have portions of their budget approved in Appendix B, which is the consent part. That's the same spending as last year, no new spending, et cetera. But portions of their budget, they needed or asked for increases in spending. And those are the ones that you will see in Appendix C. So we will have to spend some time going through the items in Appendix C, especially since I gave you a budget that's balanced. And every time you add new spending from Appendix C, you're going to run the risk of having to increase fees or taxes or dip further into your fund balance. Appendix D is going to be fairly simple. It is the fire special purpose tax district. The only holdup we usually end up with on that one is the contract with Clinton. Clinton has agreed last year to work with us in February, 2 months ago. So they've already agreed. They've already sent their request in. That's been something we've had to kind of work on at the last minute. Appendix D, fire special purpose tax district. That should be pretty easy, but it will be something council will need to spend some time with. Appendix E is the personnel requests. Here's where the rubber meets the road. There's significant increases that are requested. Council has a separate package that is included. I believe it's in your binders already under Appendix E. This is not subject to public exposure at this point. There's almost approximately $2 million overall in increases in spending. That's $2 million over our budget last year. That is not in the budget that I presented to you. I'm not saying that those requests are not warranted. I'm just simply saying that those are decisions that council is really going to have to take a good hard look at in terms of $2 million in additional spending on what you want to. So we will have to spend some time with Appendix D. Appendix F is the road preservation plan that we brought to you. We will continue to bring that plan to county council. That will require a fee increase. Enough said on that one. Appendix G is the FELO Special Projects Fund. I did not get that ready, I don't believe, for your budgets, but I have finished that, and I will have that ready for council to add to your books. Another area we will have to dive into. Council normally waits on capital until the end. And then Appendix H is our 6 mills of capital in the general fund. And of course, you're gonna have $3+ million and only have $1 million to fund. We have one more lease purchase. I'm proud to say we did not do a new lease purchase last year, which is the first time, I believe, since I've been here, we haven't done a lease purchase. All a lease purchase does is kind of puts it on our credit card that we then have to pay for it in future years. We have one more lease purchase that we issued 3 years ago. That's going to eat up about a third of our capital millage. So we will have to deal with that next year. That'll give you, without raising the capital millage. Capital millage, of course, is not restricted by Act 388. You can raise it should you decide that you want to raise more money for that 6 mills of capital, but you will, of course, have to spend some time on Appendix H. And then finally is Appendix I, that's EMS capital. We have pre-purchased an ambulance this year. You just did that recently. So Appendix I should be straightforward in terms of the EMS capital. So that's just the overall book that I gave you. Now, when it comes to the individual numbers, this is the final part of my presentation. We talked about the savings that we've done repeatedly, and that's made a big difference. For example, here, this just gives you some of the efficiencies in year one. That's the equivalent of a 7% tax cut. If we hadn't made those efficiencies, we would have needed to raise 14 more mills per year that year to make up for that $2.4 million. So those efficiencies were really important for bringing us to where we are today. That's just one example from FY18. For your FY21, the budget that we're talking about, the requests in the general fund were almost $26.8 million. $2.6 million is what I cut out of it in the first draft and gave you a budget that's a little more than $24 million. That is a 0.6% increase over our current FY20 budget. I'm going to repeat that. That's a 0.6% increase over our current budget. The CPI is 1.81%. The cost of services has risen 1.8%. And we're only recommending, or that first draft only recommends a 0.6% increase. And the thing that I know y'all are going to love to see, no fee or tax increase is needed in order to do that budget as presented. The Victims Assistance Fund, Fund 129, is balanced. That will make that very easy. The Solid Waste Enterprise, no fee increase. I think I'm going to dive a little bit more into a little bit depth on that one. But, last year we told you the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund is not going to be able to fund it. Actually, I think we did that 2 years ago. County Council only chose to raise the fee slightly. First fee increase in over, I believe, a decade. But with the savings that we've done by not going to the landfill in Union County and using the Greenville County landfill, the numbers look really good in the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. So this year, there's no fee increase recommended in the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund. Same thing with EMS. EMS, we've done a lot with the efficiencies. Some of those I know are very difficult politically. We're going to have another discussion in just a little bit about collections. We have over $1 million in private pay that's not being collected. And we're going to talk about that in an agenda item shortly. But again, no fee increase in the EMS, which is the one I was most worried about. You may recall, some of those of you who are new, there's two special funds that are controlled by constitutional officers. The first is Fund 113. It's the treasurer's budget. That's in the consent budget. Same thing with Fund 114. That's the sheriff's dedicated funds. He's got several funds there, including funds for the detention center. He's required, both the treasurer and the sheriff are required by the requirements of those different funds and those funding sources that they have to spend them in a certain form and fashion. All of those funds have fund balances. They're all healthy. They're all in the consent budget that I told you that's in Appendix B. So that one should be very easy. Fund 123, I've already told you about, is a healthy fund. That's the fire fund. That's one portion of the fire fund. Same thing with the 134 Special Purpose Tax District. I believe that's Appendix D. We will get into that a little bit, but again, that fire special purpose tax district is healthy. No need for any increases there. Victims Assistance Fund is now balanced, so that one will be easy also. And then here is the 210 fund balance projection going forward. That change from dumping in Union County, the transfer station down in Clinton, to now dumping eventually at our own transfer station, but hauling to Twin Chimneys has been a significant. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in savings, 21% reduction in our expenditures. And as a result of those savings, we will be able to move forward in the next fiscal year without a fee increase in solid waste. And again, talked about the EMS fund. That one will be real easy. The Fund 600 is the 6 mills for capital. Fund 128, just so you know, is operation and maintenance for EMS. We will dive into a lot of that. Fund 600 is the capital, the 6 mills. We will have to spend time with that one. Fund 601 is the new EMS capital that we did last year. It's a two mills of dedicated taxes solely for EMS capital. That one is very simple. Since we pre-purchased the ambulance, that one should be real easy. Fund 156 is the FELA Special Projects Fund, and that one is in one of the appendices. Now, Fund 342 is the higher education 1 mills, and you all will probably have some conversations on that. You will see that in your Appendix C. That is not in the consent budget, because I know council's going to want to talk further about Fund 342, the 1 mills that we currently set aside for higher education. Again, no taxes, no fees increase are recommended with the budget that's been presented to you. The schedule, we are a little behind because the first reading, the presentation that I'm giving this evening was actually supposed to be at the last council meeting, but with everything that went on with the virus, of course, that didn't happen. We have the first reading of the budget ordinance this evening. There's three ordinances before you: the fire special purpose tax district, the general budget, and then we've got the LOST. This is only the first reading. May 12th will be here before we know it. That's the second reading of the budget ordinance, all culminating in our third and final reading and adoption with the public hearing on June 9th. So we do need to go ahead and start those conversations on the budget as soon as council can. Now, through Act 388, put in place by the state in 2008, the county council is restricted on raising taxes on operation and maintenance. However, the state did recognize, and the state legislature did recognize, that the cost of stuff goes up. You wouldn't know that by looking at the $1.26 gasoline I saw coming in from the Walmart distribution center this morning. But in general, costs do rise. Last year, costs went up 1.81%, the increased cost of goods and services. We are actually now increasing in population. As you know, we've had a decline in population in the previous years. This year, our population has gone up almost 1%. That 1% increase is also allowed to be incorporated as, I say it's not a tax increase. It is a tax increase because we will take more money out of my pocket in terms of taxes. But with that CPI and that population that is permitted under Act 388, that's a total of 2.71%. There's no tax increase recommended. That's the same as telling you that we are operating at 2.71% more efficient than we were last year. Same money, 2.71%, more services and more cost of services. Now, if you look at what we haven't done, Act 388 in 2018 was 1.6%. Act 2019, those same numbers for the population and CPI was 2.6% in 19 and 20. And then it just shows you the numbers for next fiscal year. That's approximately 10% increase in the cost of services plus the increase in population that we need to serve. That 10% increase, council chose not to raise taxes during that 4-year period, that 3-year period plus if we don't next year, which I know council won't want to. That's an equivalent of being 10% more efficient than we were in 2017. I think that's shows a lot for the work of our departments and our employees. Here's another nice slide. Property taxes in 2020, current tax year. In this part of the state, you can see Richland County has one of the highest, Greenville, York. Those poor folks going from Lawrence County to Greenville County in the northern part of the county, property taxes are probably going to significantly increase. Here we are, one of the lower taxes in this part of the state, something that we should be proud of, that we're able to provide services and keep taxes low. I believe that's the end of my presentation. So if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Diane Anderson.
Yes, ma'am.
A couple of weeks ago, I thought that the House and the Senate met, and I thought they said that we didn't have to pay the employer's part of the retirement. They was holding off on it. What they gonna ask us to pay? Did you hear anything about that?
Yes, ma'am. Of course, I'm keeping up with all those financial things as they change. I think basically what they're saying is you will have to pay it, but we're going to defer it. So we're going to have to pay it, I believe, in a latter quarter. So that increase we will have to pay for. They're basically, I think, going to make it up in September, if I recall correctly. There's been so many things that have been moving in the past 4 weeks, but I think that was what I read was they're not going to require the increase in July, but they will make it up. We will still have to pay that 1% increase. I think they're just going to double up in the second quarter.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there other questions of Mr. Kamey at this time?
I'd just like to say that I appreciate all the work he's done on this budget, considering all other things that's been going on in this county. I just appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Any other? Okay. Thank you, John, for that presentation. Next, we have an added agenda item. Joey Avery, a coronavirus update. And I would like to again publicly thank Joey for the many, many hours that he has put in, nights and weekends, and he's done a phenomenal job. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 o'clock, he holds a conference call with the city of Lawrence, city of Clinton, Mr. Kamey. I'm on that conference call with him, and I just certainly appreciate him keeping the communication lines open. And that's what he's here tonight to do, is to just communicate with us and with the public about where we are in our county as it relates to the state and the country during this pandemic. So Joey, if you're online, if you can join us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. In the room with me, I have Matt Pennington also. But before I get into the presentation, I'd like to mention to the council that I will be submitting a project to the capital sales tax for replacement of all the old 800 megahertz radios that our first responders are currently using. Those radios are end of life as far as maintenance. So I'm a little behind, but I will catch up very quickly this week to have Mr. Kamey look at that project and then get it ready for submission. I think this is the only way we can take care of the first responders with that project. Also, I must say that other counties around us has utilized the capital sales tax to improve the radio communications for their first responders throughout their counties. And we'd like to do the same. Let me touch first on the storm that came through Sunday night and Monday morning. We did have some minor damage. We did not get nearly the damage that you've seen in the upstate and the low state, so we were very fortunate that. Had quite a few trees down, some power lines down. We had some power outages around the cities that came back very quickly, and in the rural areas, Duke Energy and Lawrence Electric worked very quickly and efficiently to try to repair some of that grid that was destroyed because of those trees. So we thank them for their efforts there. So let me touch on a little bit about the pandemic that we've been working with, and I'll give you some actual numbers that I got off the DHEC website at April 14th, 2020. We have 0 new cases in Lawrence County. However, we do have a total of 14 cases that have been confirmed in this county, and we've had 1 death that occurred last week. If you look on the SCDHEC website, they say that we have 86 estimated cases with a total of 100 possible cases. And DHEC estimates those cases, and they're calculated based on the evidence that for every 1 person that is confirmed, there are 9 other people that could have the virus who remain unidentified in our community. So they give us the confirmed number, then we have the estimated number, and then we got the total. But we do know that there are 14 confirmed cases in this county. As we ramped up for this pandemic, we implemented the continuity of operations plans, and we moved or consolidated some offices over at Hillcrest. I must say that the treasurer's office, the assessor's office, the auditor's office are doing a tremendous job in trying to take care of business as they come through. Building codes are taking care of the phone calls and requests that they have coming through, as well as the clerk of court and the probate judge. The magistrates are doing most of their work out at the county detention center, and they're taking monies out there also. So that's has really helped the flow of personnel inside that building. We have limited and almost prevented personnel from accessing that building. They must work through the treasurer's office, that drive-through window, and they're doing a tremendous job on that. Our EMS is working extremely hard, and I've got Matt here if you would like to ask him some questions. We are using personal protection equipment for EMS. They are dressing with goggles, glasses, gloves, gowns as needed when they go into these calls for service that is screened by the 911 dispatchers. We have a set of questions that they must answer, and we classify that if they have any of the flu symptoms. And then we base our response on that information that we received. If an individual doesn't give us any information, then we go in expecting dressed as full PPE just to take care of any unknown that we may walk into. Their call volume is pretty steady at this point. We have seen a slight increase, but nothing that has really stood out as far as the numbers goes. The PPE equipment that we have in supply here is predominantly for EMS personnel. They are our priority as far as PPE goes. But the second in chain of that supply system is our law enforcement personnel, both cities and county law enforcement agencies. And we work very closely on making sure that we get the supplies to them as they need. And then our fire service, we have some PPE for them also, but we have cut the response down to the fire departments to eliminate additional exposure until they're actually needed. So those have been working extremely well. We're getting some supplies in, or we've requested a lot of supplies to come in, but the supply system is slow and backlogged. So we've been very cautious and on our PPE distribution. I think that overall we're doing extremely well with maintaining what the first responders need in the field, and I feel like we probably have enough to take us another 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks through this surge. I have seen where DHEC has reported that they expect the surge or the peak of this pandemic in South Carolina to reach somewhere towards the end of April, 1st of May. So we feel sure that we have the PPE to take care of through that time frame. If the numbers increase tremendously, then that may back us down a week or so on our supplies, and we'll be waiting on the supplies to come in that we've ordered. We've also had provide supplies for Hillcrest Square. Billy and Dale can speak to that a little bit if they like. So we're ordering supplies that they may need. It's a one-team effort. We're all in this together, and everybody's working tremendously hard to keep people safe, but to provide the needed resources to the citizens and also to our first responders. Like Dr. Pitts, Chairman Pitts said, we have conference calls with our law enforcement partners 3 days a week. We have conference calls with the city's mayors and administrators that Mr. Kamey and Dr. Pitts is on. We also have some other conference calls with the hospital that we have on a daily basis. So we're really having a lot of communications with our community partners out there, and that's what's really making this effort, and I don't want to say smooth, but I will say smooth, because of all the effort and all the communications, and everybody is moving in the same direction. And it's just it's an honor to be part of such a valued team that really is working extremely hard for the citizens of this county. And we urge people to stay at home. I've got a simple saying that when somebody calls me, if you can, stay at home if all possible. That's what's going to flatten this pandemic out. If social distancing has played dividends in some other parts of the country that we've seen, and I think that's playing a large part in the state of South Carolina also. We do have a total of 3,553 cases. Without the social distancing, it could be a tremendous higher than that. I could go on for hours talking about the great work that the county first responders are doing, the department heads are doing, but that's a thumbnail sketch of what is taking place in the county. And again, we're working as hard and as efficient as we can to help protect our citizens and protect our first responders. One of the press releases that I did, I also made mention that you may see the EMS personnel come into your home wearing goggles or glasses with a mask and gloves and a gown, and that's for the citizens' protection as well as it is for the protection of the EMS personnel. So we tried to let them know that some of the changes that we've taken place out there throughout the county and our responses. We're still going to respond. That's our job. That's what we're here for. But we want to do it as efficiently and as safe as we possibly can. I'll be glad to take any questions. Matt is here with me, questions for him, but that would conclude my quick overview of what we've been doing to date.
Okay, thank you, Joey. At this time, I'll ask, are there any questions from any council members of Joey or Matt?
Yeah. Joey, I don't listen to news much because most of the time it's a bunch of lies. But how long does it take this, if a person gets this virus, how long does it take it to run its course? You know?
Mr. Yance, they use a 14-day window as a planning range. Some people have the virus and don't even know it. Some people get it and it's just a few days and they get over it. Some people that may have, that is elderly, that have some underlying health conditions, it could be a longer drawn out process. But DHEC sort of uses the 14-day window. If we have somebody that comes in contact, we'll send them to be tested. as well as we may quarantine them for up to 14 days if they have no symptoms that is showing.
Joey, Diane Anderson, thank you so much for what you all are doing. But I just heard you mention something about supplies coming in slowly, but can you talk about that a little more? What is it?
Yes, ma'am. What we have a good supply. We've gotten some supplies from the Strategic National Stockpile, which really helped us get a jump on providing PPE for our first responders. But we also have ordered other supplies through the supply system. We've gone out on the economy to look for things like rubber gloves and hand sanitizer and those kind of things. But because of the demand that has been created for those materials or those items, they're very seldom on the shelves at the stores. But we're still shopping and we're still looking for those. But we have items that are in the supply system that not only Lawrence County is competing for, but Spartanburg, Greenwood, Greenville, all the counties in the state, as well as the other states across the nation. There was a tremendous shortage to get started with, but some of the supplies are starting to loosen up. There's larger numbers coming in, and so I could see the light at the end of the tunnel on some supplies that we've anticipated getting. But it's just a matter of demand, and everybody's demanding some of the same things. Did that answer your question, Ms. Anderson?
Yes, it did.
Thank you.
Any others?
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Kamey.
I think it was you that said it pretty good when you said this is a game of whack-a-mole. When this first came up, and I really couldn't tell you, Joey can definitely relate, even what day it is. It was amazing. Every 5 minutes, a new situation we didn't think of constantly was hitting us, especially for the first couple of weeks. In my career, I've never seen anything like this. I've also never been prouder to be a public servant. The team and the community we have here in Lawrence County is outstanding. This community has gathered together. Truly, there's this saying that we're all in this together, but definitely here in Lawrence County, the cities, the law enforcement, the hospital, and of course your departments and your constitutional officers, we've all united here in Lawrence County, and I am super proud to be a part of the Lawrence County team. I'm also super proud of your organization. Your employees stepped forth without even really me having to ask them. They all volunteered. They all went above and beyond. They all picked up the torch and ran with it. And I'm about to get tearful because it's just amazing to me how profound the response has been here in Lawrence County. And I truly am proud to be a part of that whole team.
Thank you, Mr. Kamey. Any others? I would just like to say, Matt, to you and your folks who are going into houses and places that you don't know what you're going into, we certainly, our prayers are with you and your folks that work in EMS constantly. And Mr. Carroll, I know that's your real job up in a neighboring county, and so we're thinking about you and your folks as well. I'd like to echo what Mr. Kamey just said and say that I'm very proud of the work that our folks have done, even to just trying to keep the county in operation through that drive-through. We all need to go and just watch to see how that thing operates. It's pretty amazing what they've done through that little drive-through. Hearing none, we'll move forward on the agenda unless someone else has anything else. Okay, now we'll move into number 7, old business. The first is a public hearing for ordinance number 874, adding international codes. Ms. Walsh, do you or Mr. Satterfield have a text from anyone or an email wishing to speak for or against this ordinance 874?
None.
You have none. Okay, well, hearing that, I will open the public hearing and now close the public hearing. And now I will entertain a motion to approve ordinance number 874, adding the international codes from a member of council.
So move.
There's a motion by Mr. Daniel. Is there a second?
Second, Diane Anderson.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Now I'll open the floor for discussion. Any discussions? Hearing none, we will call by name call again. I'll begin with Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Wood,
Yes.
Beyonce,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That is a 7-0 vote. Moving along is a recommendation for a roof bid award for historic courthouse, phase 1. This time again, I'll recognize Mr. Dale Satterfield and Billy Wilson.
How about me, Mr. Chairman? I'll do it. Council, you all have in your pack, we are asking for an approval of award for phase 1 of the historic courthouse to replace the roof and the dome. We are asking that we award that you all let us award that to Momentum Construction. You'll also see the bid tabulation in there. We have a base bid of $429,000. The rest are alternatives and options. We chose to go with number 4, subsurface drainage improvements at $13,580. We also in there, in Momentum's bid is an allowance of $25,000 to prepare the historic courthouse for the smoke detectors and alarm system. That will be in the next phase, in the next part that I asked for. But what you have here, and for this part, is we are asking to approve Momentum's bid of $467,580. I'll take any questions.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation. Billy, I'm flipping through. I see Momentum Construction. Would you repeat that total amount? I can't find it on my paperwork.
$467,000, $580.
580?
467,580.
Okay. All right. And that is the base bid, correct?
That is base bid plus an alternative plus an allowance of $25,000.
Trying to follow you, Billy. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, if you look at the agenda item request sheet, it's highlighted on the agenda item cover sheet. He's gone over that in the working there. He's got the $429,000 for the base bid. Alternative number 4, $13,580. And then there's $25,000, which he's going to talk about in a minute, I believe, with the fire alarm. They've actually come up with a way to reduce the cost of the fire alarm system. But there's
Okay. Let's get a motion in a second, and then we can discuss it. Is there a motion to approve the expenditure of $467,580 to Momentum Construction?
So move for discussion.
There's a motion by Mr. McDaniel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Now I'll open the floor for discussion. Any questions of Billy Wilson at this point?
Yeah,
Mr. Chairman, Diane Anderson.
All right, we'll go by order. Ms. Anderson?
Well, reading in the details, I don't understand whether you're saying that the smoke alarm system is included, or is it going to be negotiated on, or what? I don't get what they're saying here.
Okay, on your agenda, the fire alarm is gonna be number D, what I'm gonna talk about next. But the general contractor had to allow $25,000 in there to make arrangements for the smoke alarm system to be put in. For the electrical work, it was $25,000 to actually make the smoke alarm system obtainable, which I'll discuss in the next agenda item. But what you're voting on now is to proceed with Momentum Construction to do the roof repair and the drainage, and the $25,000 is in that in his bid there also. So what I'm asking for is for the $467,580. That's the first part of this sequence.
Okay, Mr. Carroll, you have any questions?
So what are all the components of phase one? I know we're going to vote on this, but how many other pieces are there to finish phase one?
What I can't hear you breaking up on us.
Jeff, I think your connection is going by the wayside. Try it again, Jeff. Jeff, can you hear us? Can't hear you, Jeff.
What he's asking is, what are all the pieces to phase one, is his question.
That's basically what it is.
Phase one.
Yeah.
All right. Phase one is essentially the roof, the dome, sealing up the exterior so no water can intrude to the inside, along with a to where we can have this thing monitored. Jeff, you raising your hand?
Can't get it.
Can you hear me now?
No, your internet connection is bad, Jeff.
So phase one is just like I said, it is the water intrusion, stopping it, the roof and the dome and the fire alarm system. That is all phase one. The reason why we pulled the fire alarm system out of the initial bid, Momentum Construction was not using the same contractors that we have used on all of our buildings and who monitor our buildings. That's why we pulled them out and we went with our own contractor. By doing that, we also saved $17,000.
I follow you.
Okay.
I don't know if Jeff got his question asked or not.
He stuck up an okay sign. I think he's good.
Jeff, can you hear us?
I think he's frozen. He's froze.
He's gonna have to restart. All right, let's keep going. If he comes back in, I'll come back to him. Mr. McDaniel, you got any questions?
I think you answered it. So we're taking out, Momentum is not going to do the fire, and CSS fire systems is going to do it, correct?
That is correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Which we'll vote on next. Okay, Mr. Patterson?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
We've set aside $700,000 to do this, and we got to get started sometime. And I think this is a good beginning right here.
Okay, Mr. Yance?
On this, the roof, the pictures look pretty rough. So what are you saying? What do you think? Half of it needs repairing, quarter of it, 2/3 of it, or what? I'm just curious, just how much repair they're gonna do.
The repair on the roof will not be the majority of the work. The majority of the work is gonna be on the dome, but the roof will be repaired to make sure that we stop all the leaks. It doesn't replace the roof. It only repairs the roof, but we will replace or repair the dome, and that includes a copper dome.
Does phase 2 or 3 replace the roof?
Yes, phase 2, exterior phase 2 would replace the roof.
Okay.
Okay, because I was going
Thank
to
you.
ask how old the roof is.
Miss Anderson, the roof was replaced when Mr. Holland was here. Now that goes back prior to when he left and things. So we're looking at about it's close to 20 years old.
All right, thank you.
Look, let me make a comment, and this is an assumption that if the capital sales tax authorizes those two projects on the courthouse and the voters pass it, I know all the stars have to align. Does that replace the roof at that time?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, all right. That's kind of what I thought. I just wanted to be sure. Any other questions before I call for the vote? Hearing none. We have a motion that has been properly seconded. We will call by name for this motion to expend $467,580. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
You got me now?
We got you now.
Yeah, it's out here in Hawaii, it's hard. I'm good.
Mr.
We see all that.
Mr. McDaniel?
Aye.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Yance?
Yes, sir. Yes.
I'm a yes. That is a 7-0. Next, Billy, while you're there, we kind of hit on it, but just if you could move into the fire alarm award, and that is you've already said it, but a $17,000 savings by us doing it, not going through the general contractor.
Correct. That bid is at $81,222. And like I said, that by us doing that puts this company is already monitoring our current buildings, our current smoke alarms and fire alarms and things. So this just puts this in line with the rest of our buildings.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation from Mr. Wilson. Is there a motion to award the fire alarm bid?
Motion to approve it.
Motion by Mr. Wood. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McDaniel. Any discussion?
I have a question. 81,000 and some change for this fire alarm system.
Yes,
how
sir.
much of it can be reused after phase 2? Because I'm assuming when we do the interior of the building on phase 2 or 3, whichever phase it is, we're gonna have to rip out the fire alarm to redo it. Will we be able to put the same one back up?
Yes, we will be able to, whenever we go in to remodel inside, it's just like what we're doing here at Hillcrest Square. They'll come in, they'll move it to the side out of their way, they'll do the work, bring it back over and put it back in place.
Gotcha.
So each one of these phases was designed so that we would not lose any investment. So we'll be able to take care of this $10 million problem a little bit at a time. So we're going to be building, we'll be building phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 will build on each other. We won't lose any investment.
Any other questions? Okay, if not, we will call for the vote. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes, sir.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Yance,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That is a 7-0 vote. Billy, thank you for the work you have done in preparing to get ready for this pretty significant project here. Thank you.
I appreciate the accolades, but Dale Satterfield too, and he is a great counterpart, and I appreciate all that he helps me with, and I hope that I help him with.
Thank you to both of you.
If you look at your agenda, I'm still here, so I got one more.
Are you up for the?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
On my computer saying something about my thing unstable. So if I go out, I'll let you know. I'm getting some comments back from the computer. Yes,
Okay.
making you aware.
All right, you're still there. Okay. All right, Billy, you're up.
Okay, real quick, at the last meeting where we were all able to come together, I mentioned to you that we would be bringing back an RFP to go out for debt collections for our EMS. What you have in your packet is what we will be sending out. It is a copy of the RFP, and we are asking that that council go ahead and let the purchasing department go ahead and put this out on the street and get some feedback, and we'll bring that back to you with our calculations and an award at a later time. But we're asking that we go ahead and put this out on the street for to get the proposals back.
All right, you've heard the recommendation to issue a request for proposals for debt collections for emergency medical services. The proposals will be due back at 2 p.m. on May the 4th, 2020. This does not mean we are awarding this at this point. This is just a request for proposals. Is there a motion to allow the purchasing department to put this to on the streets?
So moved.
Motion by Patterson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. McDaniel. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for the vote. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Yance?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. That is a 7-0 vote. Thank you, Billy, and whoever else worked with you on that.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
In our agenda is Directive 331.18. That is the continuity of operations where we voted to pay employees non-essential to work from home during this time. That expired on April the 15th. And before we vote or discuss it, I'd like to recognize our county administrator, Mr. Kamey, for any comments that he would like to make about this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Right now, council, we have really 4 groups of people. We've got folks that have been at home and are not working, have not been working for some time. We have other folks that are working more like a part-time basis, but still getting paid on a full-time basis. And by the way, those folks on that first group that have been at home but have not been able to work, those folks are getting paid full-time wages also. And then the second group, like I said, is folks that are working shifts so that they can keep their social distancing within their offices. Those folks are also getting paid full-time, and they're currently maybe working less than full-time hours. Then you've got other folks that are working full-time and of course getting paid for full-time. And then you have folks like Joey and Matt and several of us that have pretty much been working nonstop from the beginning. So the original action from County Council was to grant pay for folks that needed to be excused due to the virus up until the 1st of April. That was then extended when we shut down the operations until this evening. So basically at this point, I'm needing a direction from County Council on where we go from here in terms of paying our employees who can not report to work due to the virus situation.
Okay, you've heard from our county administrator. You're also aware of what we approved through April the 15th. I will just say, and I knew that we were on a slippery slope when we did this. In light of what I've heard the governor say and the president say, we're going to try to get this country going back to work. Since I made the proposal, I'm going to just suggest that we continue this through April the, is it 30th, April the 30th. And that on assuming that is what council would like to do, that on May 1st, we would return to our normal operation unless we have to change it. That's just my thoughts. What are other people's thoughts on this?
Was that a motion?
I didn't make a motion. I'm trying to gather what people's ideas and thoughts are.
I'm on board with what you said.
I'd make a motion that we continue the current directive until our next council meeting. So we'll have a better understanding of where we are. That would continue at 2 weeks from today.
Okay. All right. So there's a motion by Mr. Carroll that we would continue this directive until April is that the 28th?
The 29th, actually, because we would meet that evening on the 28th.
Correct, through the 29th.
Okay. All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. There's a second by Mr. Wood. Now I'll open the floor for discussion. Any discussion?
I will say I have heard from some employees that are working who aren't frontline folks. They're not emergency services, and I guess they're considered essential, but they're slightly aggravated that they're having to work and other folks get to sit at home and collect a paycheck. So just to relay that, because I have had a few reach out.
I understand, and same thing for the school district as well. Any others?
I have to go along with what Mr. Patterson said. I have heard some negative vibe from some of the people. So I want us to make sure that we know that they are talking. So you have to be aware that there are some conversation out there. But I think we're trying to do what's best for the majority by making sure that everybody is being looked after, at least for this, during this period of time. And I'm hoping that everybody, the supervisors would look at it, in a better light also.
Well, most of the people that aren't working they didn't choose to do this. They were told they couldn't work. So that's why I'm on board with it.
Well, it's okay.
Mr. Kamey or Mr. Avery, whoever has the answer, are we eligible to receive federal funds to repay us for paying these people who are not physically working?
I'm not sure we're ready to answer that. Joey, you're still unmuted if you want to contribute. The CARES Act, as you know, is something we're wading through. In this state, I think only one county met the initial threshold for funding. Greenville County is a $500,000 threshold. But we are continuing to collect the finances, the financial impact such that when we do have that determination as to what we can get reimbursed on, we will have all that information collected and we will be ready at that point. But I know Lisa's been looking at it. Joey and I, we've been getting information, but we've just been trying to stay ahead of that virus itself. Joey, you're back online?
Yes, sir. That's correct, John. We are collecting the receipts that we use to make some purchases of supplies, and we'll sit down and we'll put the application together to submit to FEMA, and then we'll sit down with them face to face is normally the way that the process works. And I'm sure there'll be some supplies that will be able to claim without any question. But I don't think we're going to have many questionable purchases because we've been very diligent on what we're purchasing. And so I feel very comfortable with the process. It's going to be a timely process, but we're keeping the receipts and notes as we make purchases so that when we get ready to put that together, it's sort of still fresh in our mind, if you will.
Is someone else saying something? Okay.
Was there another question? I'm sorry. This is Joey. Okay, thank you.
You've had a motion that has been properly seconded. We will call for the vote. I'll restate the motion by Mr. Carroll to continue the directive 331.18 through April the 29th when we convene next for our council meeting. That is the motion that has been seconded, and at this time I will call for the vote by name. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
No.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Mr. Yance?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. The vote passes 6-1 with Councilman Patterson in opposition. Next, moving along in the agenda is new business. And this time I would like to recognize Ms. Lisa Kirk again, excuse me, for the request to extend the contract by 1 year for the auditing firm Malden and Jenkins. Ms. Kirk, are you there? If you would like to address council at this time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Pitts. I do realize that I came before y'all just in the previous year and had requested an extension for Malden and Jenkins. We have written the RFP for the audit services. We had everything ready to go when COVID-19 hit. That has thrown a huge kink in it, not to mention doing HR for almost 6 months. When we handle HR, we handle onboarding, workers' comp, unemployment, insurance and benefits. So it's a good part of our time. With that being said, we have with Malden and Jenkins, they have our data. Our data is in their computer base. We know what they expect. We know what schedules they want. And it will make it much easier. And I think Mr. Wilson can reiterate some of this because he and I are the biggest players in this as far as our department, since his department kind of handles the capital side of this. It's just a massive amount of work. And then with COVID-19, trying to understand all of the rules and the regulations and the guidelines for reimbursement and keeping up with those expenses. And then we're getting hit with FOIAs because of the elections. It's just a lot of massive work for a little 4-person team. And I'm just respectfully requesting, if not begging at this point, if we could simply renew Malden and Jenkins' contract for fiscal year 2020 and then send the RFP out when things are calmer.
Okay, you've heard the recommendation by our finance director. Is there a motion to authorize an extension of services for our auditing firm for Malden and Jenkins?
Motion to approve it.
Second, Diane Anderson.
And I believe a second by Ms. Anderson. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now I'll open the floor for discussion. Anyone? Hearing none, we will call for vote by name. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes, sir.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Yantz,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That vote is 7-0. Thank you, Ms. Kirk. We certainly understand the dilemma that you have been in. Next, first reading for the FY21 budget ordinance number 875. You've heard the presentation from the county administrator. Is there a motion to approve on first reading budget ordinance number 875 for FY21?
Mr. Chairman, Diane Anderson, I move for first reading approval of ordinance 875, the 21st fiscal year budget.
Okay, is there a second? There's a motion by Ms. Anderson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yantz. Now I'll open the floor for discussion. Any discussion? I'm gonna go by name through this. Ms. Anderson, any questions or comments?
I realize it's a trying time, and since Mr. Kamen mentioned it was a 0.6 increase, but I want us to make sure that we are looking at everything, because I think we are going to be facing some different times. And because at one time I wanted to just say we just do the budget based on what we had on last year. But since it's not that much of an increase, I'm willing to go ahead on and vote for this one, hoping that we can be able to keep other things in line, because I really think we're going to be facing some challenges.
Okay, Mr. Carroll,
No comment.
Mr. McDaniel. Garrett? There you
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute. I'm good.
go. Okay, Mr. Patterson.
I do agree with Ms. Anderson. I think we're going to have a lot of non-consent items to look at and delve through, and we'll have to be very diligent on how we appropriate them. One item that is of interest to me, this probably minute in the grand scheme of things, but the 1 mil of taxes that we provide to Piedmont Tech and USC Union, this dispersed at a 90% and 10% rate. I almost feel that's unproportional. I think when that was instituted, it was probably appropriate that Piedmont Tech did 90% of what USC Union did, but I would argue that today that those percentages have changed, and I'd be curious to know how many students each of those serve comparatively, and maybe adjust that percentage out in the final draft.
Okay. Mr. Wood?
I don't have any comment.
Mr. Yantz?
No, sir.
And the only thing I will say is originally my thoughts, I had forgotten, I knew it, but I had forgotten that there was a mandatory 1% increase for health insurance. And so that's all I've got to say about it. Hearing any more discussion on first reading? Hearing none, I'll call for the vote by name. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Carroll?
Yes, approved.
McDaniel?
Yes.
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
Mr. Wood?
Yes.
Yantz?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That is a 7-0 vote. Next is ordinance number 876, special purpose tax district for FY21. I believe that is the, help me out here, I'm trying to find it.
That's a fire budget.
I thought it was the fire budget. Okay, is there a motion to approve the fire special purpose tax district, ordinance 876?
Motion to approve it.
Motion by Mr. Wood, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Patterson. Again, I'll open the floor for discussion. Ms. Anderson?
None.
Patterson,
None.
Mr. Wood,
No comment.
Mr. Yance.
None.
Sir?
None.
All right, hearing none, we'll call for the vote. This is for the fire. I'm trying to write this down as well. The fire budget on first reading. Again, Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Yance,
Yes.
and I'm a yes, is a 7-0 vote. Next is ordinance number 877, the local option sales tax. Is there a motion to approve the local option sales tax? I'm looking for my paper.
Mr. Chairman, I move for first reading approval of ordinance 877.
The motion by Ms. Anderson. There's a second. I will second it for discussion. And I finally have found my papers. Okay. This is the local option sales tax for the fiscal year 2020-2021. Mr. Kamey, is there anything you would like to say about this?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I know this one is something that council really wants to take a look at. We did this last year where we changed the wording so that it would be up to 29%. As you all know, out of the local option sales tax, up to 29% can be used for operations. Council has used that for over a decade or more. I don't know the exact timing when council started using that, but they've used this revenue source for a long period of time. It's about $850,000 in revenue. Essentially, if we reduce the amount of that sales tax, you will be cutting out some or all of that $850,000. Just something to keep in mind as we start those discussions. Now, last year, the wording was such that we would look at it after the audit. Mechanically, that's just not really possible. The decision really needs to be made during the budget discussion. So if council does choose to reduce the amount of LOST sales tax that we use for operation and maintenance, which essentially means that will go back to us taxpayers as a refund, a further amount of refund on our property taxes. But again, that will put some hole in the revenues of the budget, of the general fund budget in the upcoming fiscal year. So the wording has been changed a little bit such that we will make that decision prior to a third and final reading of this ordinance.
Okay. Likewise, on this one, I'll open the floor for discussion by name. Ms. Anderson?
The reason I'm for it is that we use up to the 29%. You don't have to use it all, but sometime, especially at this particular time, we might need to look at it. So I feel like we need to have this in place to go along with the budget.
Okay, Mr. Carroll?
Yeah, depending on what we do with the budget and the things that are asked outside of the consent budgets, I'd like to see what our obligation's going to be before we decide to modify the language. I'm fine with what it is right now.
Mr. McDaniel?
Yes, I definitely like to see what we can come up with as far as balancing the budget without using the 850,000. I'm gonna vote for it just in case we do need to use it. My understanding, correct, we don't have to use it even if we vote for this ordinance, correct?
That's right.
That's correct, but mechanically, it's very difficult for you. Basically, you have to change your decision real quickly because the bills go out. It makes more sense as we're discussing the budget. If you decide during the budget discussions that you want to reduce the amount that we are going to spend out of the LOST, that will essentially give us taxpayers back more in a rebate, and we will use less of that, but that will reduce the amount of revenues in your current fiscal year. So that conversation, as we're talking about the budget, that's when you will actually make that decision as to how much of that up to 29% you will actually want to utilize in the current year.
As a follow-up question to that, by what you just said, then I'm assuming that we used all 29% for this current budget year. Is that correct?
That's correct. We billed out all of the 29%. So this current fiscal year, we will have received all of the 29% as a revenue.
Okay. All right. Back to Mr. McDaniel, you got any further questions?
Yeah, how does it work if we have a surplus? Does that money not go back?
So basically it would be in arrears. So what you would do is you would reduce it this upcoming fiscal year. You would create a deficit. You would utilize your 654 funds, which we talked about earlier, and that would pay for that hole in the budget. So on paper, we may end up with a hole in the budget, and that hole may never materialize. So in the past, we've produced balanced budgets, but we've actually ended up with surpluses because the economy was so well, costs were kept in line and everything. So in this upcoming fiscal year, as we're diving into the revenues, that's where you really want to take a good hard look at the budget in terms of how much of that $850,000 you want to utilize in this upcoming fiscal year. If you decide you want to use a portion of it or none of it, then we will basically take that amount out of the current, the next fiscal year's revenues. We really won't know about it until the end of the fiscal year as to how much we've utilized. And in a sense, to answer your question, Councilman, that would be that would come about as basically we would run a deficit at this at the end of next fiscal year, and then that deficit would basically be made up by what we have left in our general fund balance. We have a very healthy general fund balance.
Okay, so just for clarification, voting for 877 does not obligate us to the 29%, correct?
No, it does not. You are allowed to take up to the 29%, but when you do the budgeting, that is, in my opinion, the actual action you will take on how much of that 29%, or basically $850,000 in revenue, how much of that you will actually be utilizing. So, for example, if you decide you don't want to use any of that 29%, and you want to give us all back all of that 29% next tax year, or actually it'd be this coming tax year, 2020 tax year. It's a year behind in taxes, so it gets a little confusing. Basically, that would be a zero in terms of the revenue that is in that line item.
All right, thank you. I just think that's something we need to be looking at as council, especially what's going on around the world and people getting laid off. People need every dime they can get. If we can look at giving them some kind of relief when it comes to the taxes that we're collecting. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Patterson.
Yes, I share Mr. McDaniel's sentence on the trying to balance the budget without that 850 in there. One, I think we can do it, but also to note from last year, or I'm sorry, for this year, FY 2020, we budgeted 24 million and we're projected to come in at 27, which is a difference of 25 million, which is less than the 850,000 that we took from the taxpayers in the local option sales tax. And then also he already mentioned Fund 654, that's got a $2.7 million balance in it that we've been fortunate enough since FY 17 to run surplus in. We also ran a surplus in the general budget last year. So we're running these surpluses and we're coming in under budget, which is fantastic. I think now is a good time for us to give back to the taxpayers that local option sales tax that they voted on many years ago to keep.
Okay. Mr. Wood, you got any more comments, Mr. Patterson? Mr. Wood?
I'm fixing to throw a rock in this thing. And Mr. Kamey remembers, and Mr. Cruikshanks. Is Mr. Cruikshanks at the meeting back there?
Sure.
Now, he knows just as well as I do, the county cannot take 29% of this local option sales tax. it can only take 14.5%. The city of Clinton and the city of Lawrence takes the remainder 14.5%. So we cannot take 29% of the local option sales tax by state law. It can be taken, but the county cannot receive it. $850,000 is not 29% of the local option sales tax. It's 14.5%. So the verbiage needs to be changed in this thing if you're gonna do it. It says we can take 29%, but we cannot take 29%. And Mr. Cruikshanks, he can verify exactly what I just said. We went through all this last year. It says that Lawrence County can take 29%, but we can't. We take 14.5%. $850,000 is not 29%. The other 14.5% goes to the city of Clinton and the city of Lawrence, and they take it. Can you get in on that, Mr. Cruikshanks?
Yes, sir. I don't disagree with you, Mr. Wood.
Mr. Kamey, you remember us talking about this last year?
Yeah, unfortunately, I forgot about it, but you're absolutely correct. We don't control that other portion that the cities get. So you are absolutely correct in that, what you're saying.
There's nothing wrong with passing this tonight, but before we go to the second reading, let's get the verbiage right in this ordinance that says that we taking 14.5% instead of 29%.
Well, let's see where the vote goes, and it may be a moot point. Mr. Yance.
I remember last year, Mr. Joe talking about this, but voting for this tonight doesn't tie us down to anything, right?
It does not. It just passes it for the first reading. It will require 3 readings.
Now, I'm like Mr. Joe. I'd like to kind of clarify just what it does mean.
Okay. And the last thing I'll say is I'll be voting in opposition of this because people are losing wages. We know that we have at least 2 plants that have laid off people. I concur with Mr. McDaniel and Mr. Patterson that we have run a surplus. We're carrying over $2.7 million in the 6 mills. And so I will not be voting in support of it. That's just my comments. And that concludes comments from all of council. We have a motion that has been properly seconded, and we will call for the vote in support of the local option sales tax. That's what the motion says, is to pass local option sales tax. And I'm just repeating what it says right now, Mr. Wood. I recognize what you're saying, but it says up to 29%. That's what the motion is. So I'll call by name and begin with Ms. Anderson.
So does the motion mean that we might not take 29% or 14.5%? There's a possibility we might balance this budget on 5% of it.
That's correct.
That's correct. Yeah.
That's right.
We did that one year. We passed it to take the maximum allowable amount, but we didn't take, but I think about half of it that year. I don't remember what year it was, but.
Sure did.
Okay. I will call for the vote. Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Carroll.
Since it's not right, I'm gonna vote no.
You're voting no?
That's correct. The verbiage is not right. I'm gonna vote no.
Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Okay.
I couldn't hear you, Mr. McDaniel.
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Patterson.
I'm going to vote no, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wood.
I'm gonna have to vote no to and then ask that it be brought back up at the next meeting with the right verbiage and all in it, and have another vote on it. So I'm gonna vote no tonight.
All right, Mr. Yance.
I'll vote yes tonight, but I would like to see the wording and the verbiage
Okay.
clarified.
And I am voting no, and that means the motion fails on a 3-4 vote with council members Carroll, Patterson, Wood, and Pitts voting in opposition. Okay?
What, can I say something, David?
Sir.
What this does, it makes it look like Lawrence County takes all this money, whereas Lawrence County does it. The cities take, the city of Lawrence and the city of Clinton take their 7.5% or whatever it is. And it makes us look bad, you know, saying we're taking that much of the money when we're not actually taking it.
Right. Well, it did not pass for first reading, so they can bring it back next time with a, whatever recommendations comes from the administration.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I feel like if the majority just do not want to use the loss, you know, the option sale tax, we can do without it if that's what they're trying to say. But I only voted for it. So if we need it up to, and if the verbiage is the only thing that is causing people to have a difference of whatever it is, we just need to just let it go. I don't see, my main thing is we trying to keep the budget going the way it should be as much as we can, since we are not, especially since we're not meeting in person. So I look at it.
It goes back to now, we got a balanced budget and this money is included in that balanced budget. Is that not right, Mr. Kamey?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And so
if you take it out, we $850,000 short on balancing this budget this year. So I don't really know what we need to do.
That's what I'm saying. We're not following through to try to make sure we moving along. We can, you know, not use any of it, but at least to get it on the starting path we need to have it on, we need to be all on the same accord. But that's just me. We can. I just feel like we just need to drop it if we want to drop it. I don't have no problem, but I feel like if we trying to keep the budget going as we need to have it going and the flow that we need to have it going so we can be passing it come June, we need to be, you know, working together.
And my rationale for that is exactly what you're saying, Ms. Anderson. I'm saying that we don't take any of the money this year because we're running these surpluses, and that we could withstand from taking any of that local option sales tax this year. I think that's what you were asking, and that is my thought process.
I don't have a problem with it, but I know it's already in the budget.
Right.
And so we are trying to keep the budget on the track that we need to keep it on, as well as the local option sales tax. But if we don't want to use it, we can just take the whole thing out and just go head on with the budget. I just believe in moving, you know, on the right way.
Well, I think the administration just got direction from this council, from the majority of it failing. So I believe Mr. Kamey is going to have to go back and put a 0 in for that budgeted revenue at this point, because we didn't pass it on the first. Mr. Kamey, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm hearing from Mr. Wood that we need to bring the verbiage back first, and maybe Mr. Carroll also, that they're questioning the actual verbiage that's in there. I look at this as two separate items. I look at it as the ordinance itself, which allows you the ability to use that money. And then I look at the budget itself, which is when you actually are going to make that decision as to how much of that money you will or will not use in this upcoming calendar year. But you are correct. The net result is $850,000 in revenue is what that 14.5% or whatever that number is of the sales tax would be. I'm not even so sure $850,000 is a good number. There's some questions in terms of how much sales tax revenue we'll actually be seeing and this latter part of this quarter, and then, subsequent quarters coming up. Nobody really knows which way the economy is going. The good thing is, council, we are sitting on a healthy fund balance, and we have run those surpluses, which have helped us to bolster that fund balance, which we don't have to worry about going into this uncertain economic times as to how we're going to pay our bills and keep our services going. So that is the good news. We don't have to worry about that, thanks to all the work we've been able to do to get our fund balance so healthy over these past few years.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to move on because you can bring back, you've got 2 council members asking for revised verbiage. So if you would like to bring back an option for that at the next meeting, that's fine. But tonight it has failed and we will move forward. Okay. Next on the agenda is the Little North Carolina Road Memorandum Understanding number 9. Dale, are you speaking to that?
He's making his way.
Okay.
Yes, sir. We have a commercial realtor who specializes in finding locations for quarries. On Old or Little North Carolina Road, there's a tract of land that they own. It is bordered by one of our gravel county roads, and they have offered, if we will allow them to do it, to improve that county gravel road to a 20-foot travel path. They will make all the improvements, including replacing one of the bridge crossings that will be engineered and suitable for their tractor trailer truck haul gravel. And it's the reason I can think of that we wouldn't allow them to improve our county road for us.
Okay. You've heard the recommendation by Mr. Satterfield to authorize this memorandum of understanding. Basically, someone will take over the maintenance of the county-owned road. Is there a motion to approve such?
So move.
Motion by Mr. McDaniel. Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Yance. Any discussion?
I have some, David.
All right, go ahead, Mr. Wood.
What bothers me about this is going to be a rock quarry. And I hadn't been there. I don't know exactly where this is at, but we need to talk to the people in the surrounding area that this is going to directly affect before we agree to do this. It's just like a landfill. Don't jump on it just because we think it's going to be right. I mean, this might be something that the people in the neighborhood absolutely do not want. So I think this thing needs to be tabled, that we put it to the public and let the public come and talk to us about what they want to say about this rock quarry. I don't really want to vote on something like this if I think it's going to interfere with somebody's everyday life.
Okay, are you making a motion to table it?
Yes, sir, I'll do that.
And I'll second it.
Second by Ms.
Dr. Anderson.
Okay, we have a motion to table it that has been properly seconded. Does that require a vote, Mr. Cruikshank?
Yes.
Yeah.
I said yes. So we will roll call to table this motion. I'll call by name again. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Affirmative.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson.
I'll vote in consensus of council, but I would like to say that it was my understanding this is just for them to update a road. They already own the property, if I heard Mr. Satterfield correctly. And given the fact that Lawrence County has no zoning, we really can't tell them what they can or can't do on their property. Kind of gets into do we have zoning or do we not have zoning? Since we don't have zoning, I don't know why we can stop them from except the fact that we can control who goes up and down that particular road. You know, somebody wants to put in us in a new bridge, given all the bridge problems that we have, I sure wouldn't argue with it. So I'm gonna vote no, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, you're voting no? Okay.
Correct.
All right, Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Mr. Yance,
Yes.
and I'm voting yes, just for due diligence, further discussion. So that motion passes 6-1 to table with Councilman Patterson in opposition.
Could we put something in the paper about this and describe what it's gonna do and what's gonna be built up there? And I know we can, at the time we got now, the way we having the meet, we can't let people come in and talk about it, but I don't really know what we could do, but we need to let those people up there know some kind of way what's happening. You remember what happened at the landfill up there at Gray Court? You know, that was all fine and dandy and everything that got started, and then everybody and his brother was against it, which I couldn't blame them.
You got it.
Martin Lake.
I think we could put a public service announcement in the local papers.
And to start a business like this, you gotta get DHEC approval and everything. And all this will be bearing on that thing. They can't just come in there and dig a big old hole and start a rock pour without DHEC permits.
I think if it's like most DHEC permits, they're gonna have to post and have community meetings. Just like when they build chicken houses, they have to post 30 days and have meetings. I honestly don't think it's the job of this council to start holding public meetings for what anybody wants to do on their personal property.
Well, I can agree with that too, you know, but a rock quarry.
I mean, I understand your concern, and if I lived there, I wouldn't want it either, personally.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, if my neighbor wants to put a swimming pool in his backyard, do we have a public meeting so I can tell everybody I don't like it?
Well, it's just like me. I live right across the road from a racetrack. I love racing, but there's a lot of people don't. Them cars sound good to me, but it don't to a lot of other people. But I'm all for a person doing what they want to on their own property, but this is just something I think is just a little bit different. I think Mr. Cruikshanks is coming up.
All right. I've been sitting in the back enjoying this. This is nice. Just one thing, as far as publishing a notice, you would be setting a dangerous precedent by doing that, because you would be saying that any action on any private property or on a public road would require you to put a public notice out there. I think the question here would be the due diligence from the Public Works Department as to whether or not there's residences up there. I think in my conversations in drafting this memo, it is right on the Newberry County line, and if I'm not mistaken, there are no residences there. However, since the motion to table is passed, I think the proper action now would be to come back with Mr. Satterfield come back with whatever information regarding the due diligence that council wishes. I would be very hesitant to come in and say anything with regard to putting out a public notice in the paper regarding this, because you set a very, very dangerous precedent at that point.
I can agree with that.
Thank you.
But one other thing, the reason these people want, I mean, we're talking now, the reason these people want to improve this road, they're going to be running them big heavy gravel trucks in and out, and they got a certain bridge they got to go across, and they got to have a good bridge. They trying to make it sound like they're going to do this for the county when they're doing it for themselves.
Well, and there are two other issues that I'll bring up. One is DHEC does have control in opening it. Secondly, Department of Revenue has control of setting the value and the taxation. They closely monitor any of these bits or any of the things of this nature. So you've got two state agencies that'll be overseeing it.
Thank you, Mr. Cruikshank.
All right, that's a good suggestion, Mr. Cruikshanks. Mr. Satterfield, if you and your folks can do, just speak to those residents, and then we can talk about it at the next meeting, okay? Next, moving along in our agenda, believe it or not, is Resolution 2020-08, Fair Housing Resolution. Is there a motion to approve, if I can find it, the Fair Housing Month, I believe is what it is.
So move to approve 2020-08.
All right, motion by Mr. McDaniel. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call for vote by name again. Ms. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McDaniel,
Yes.
Mr. Patterson,
Yes.
Mr. Wood,
Yes.
Yance,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. That passes 7-0. I believe next on our agenda is the public comments section. Ms. Walsh, have you received any comments during this live video cast, I suppose is what it's called?
None.
None? All right. Next is our county council comments, and since we went by name all night, I'll go by name again, alphabetical order. Ms. Anderson,
None, no comments.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes, sir. I'll say one thing. The things we've discussed tonight are all worried about the citizens of the county and the monies that they may have to pay and having lost money and what's going on. So I think we've made some good decisions, and we'll have to use resources that we currently have maybe to make up some things to give something back. So I'm in favor of what we've done.
okay, Mr. McDaniel,
As anybody watching, and all the council members, just be safe, do your due diligence, stay quarantined until it's time for us to go back out.
okay, Mr. Patterson,
Sure. I have a few things tonight, Mr. Chairman. I know we recognize the Fair Housing Month, but another big one in amongst the many is this is Child Abuse Prevention Month. And normally the sheriff would have had a big event at the courthouse, but given our current situation, that wasn't able to be held. So that's what all the blue twirlies are around the county, is for the Child Abuse Awareness Month. So everybody can recognize that. I do want to thank, if Joey's still on here, Joey and all the emergency frontline staff, sheriff, fire, EMS, way too many to mention. They have gone above and beyond and adapted quite well during these times. I do want to say something about the library as well as some of our other public buildings. I've gotten several calls about opening back up the library, which obviously with the current shutdown is not necessarily the best idea, but I do believe when it is ready and all these levies are lifted, we need to look at a phased approach for maybe all of our offices, because if we just flip a switch, it's going to be a madhouse everywhere. And as long as there's at least one case in Lawrence County, we're all still at risk. Until all the cases are gone, in theory, we're all at risk, and it could fire back up if we aren't careful about how we open up our offices to the public. And then the last thing, Mr. Yance mentioned earlier about the EMS, sheriff, 911, coroner's office, evidence building. After all the public has had their opportunity to present capital project sales tax, I would be very interested if there was some space for any of that phase 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever's available, for us looking at maybe adding that to our capital project sales tax if room should allow.
okay,
And that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
all right. Let's see, Mr. Wood,
I would just like to say thanks to everyone that IT people. I can't name everybody that made all this possible tonight for us to have this meeting. I think it worked wonderful. We had a few little glitches, but we ironed them all out, and it just seemed like it worked so well. I hate this virus, but I sure have loved having my grandbaby for the last 3 weeks. She's been up here with me from Charleston, and we've had a ball with her. But I just ditto again. I appreciate everything everybody's done to make this possible, and thank you.
all right, and Mr. Yance.
Well, ditto what everybody said. Pat on the back to all the county workers. and we're hanging tough, and we'll see this thing through.
And I would like to close by saying this, many of what everyone else has said. Our folks have gone above and beyond the call of duty. It will make, assuming that we get to have our Employee Appreciation Day in July, it will make it even more special this year. And the last thing I want to say is a special thanks to Tammy Hanks and her staff for making this technology available and work. It wasn't their fault that my battery ran dead. That was my fault. Thank you so much for making it work and for everyone. That concludes the council comments. There is no executive session. And so it is time to adjourn. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Patterson. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Wood. Now watch this. We're not calling by names. We're going to raise hands. All in favor of adjourning, raise your right hand and wave goodbye. Have a good night.
Everybody have a good week.
Bye-bye.